Hello and welcome to the part 4 of our Prague Castle series. In this video we'll focus on the Golden Lane and the Daliborka Tower. So this street was created in the 15th century during the rule of Vladislav Jagelló, who built a new wall. He extended the fortification of the Prague Castle. The houses were created about 100 years later during the times of Rudolf II in the 16th century, when he allowed the Red Artillerymen, the castle guard, to build their little houses inside of the walls. The name Golden Lane comes probably also from the 16th century, when there used to be goldsmiths living here. You know, the legend says that there were alchemists living here trying to find a way how to make gold artificially, but they actually lived elsewhere. So there were goldsmiths living here. In the 19th century, there were mostly poor people living here, and the name Golden Lane started to be used ironically because there was an open sewer running down the street, so you get the idea, Golden Lane. People lived here until 1950s. Then the houses during communist times, they were confiscated and it became basically a museum, an open-air museum. So that's when they made them colorful like this as well. They was painted, you know, in late 1950s by Jiří Trnka. So it remains a museum today as well, and some of the houses are shops. So let's have a look inside some of the houses. For example, this blue one. That's where Franz Kafka used to write. He wrote The Countryside Doctor, the country doctor in this house. He didn't actually live here, he just came here to write, so he rented the house and came here for inspiration and for peace of mind. So let's have a look inside. You know, Franz Kafka is probably the most famous Czech author.
Franz Kafka really loved this house.
So you can see how tiny they are. So we're inside of the wall. There's a view of the stag moat over here. Guys, now we're entering a house of Marie Pašková, and in 1920s she actually made this like a museum. Sorry, just hit my head. And people were much shorter back then. And you know, she was charging 20 cents for entering this house, so you can see like 1920s decoration, furniture. Yeah, the next house we have here is a house of a tailor. So you can have a look inside. It's also from the period of the First Republic, between World War I and World War II. It is a traditional folk music played. And here we have a house of a herbalist. This would be from 18th century. So you can see a little bed over here, little bedroom, and different herbs, dried herbs hanging here. Yeah, here we can see the alchemist lab. In the 16th century, Rudolf II, he invited a lot of alchemists to Prague because he was trying to find a way how to make gold artificially, and he also wanted to create an elixir of eternal life. So they were working here. Some of the alchemists are said to be spies for the British Crown, like infamous Edward Kelly. So now we're going to climb the stairs and we'll go inside of the walls, where there's an exhibition of armor and weapons. So let's have a look. So now let's go through the wall. So you can see different armors from different time periods. They're actually not historical armors. They're new copies. You can see some halberdiers. You know, notice on the halberdiers there's this hook. This was used to take down a cavalry, a rider of a horse. You know, to be honest, I'm surprised how crowded it is. It's end of January and it feels as crowded as in the summer. So, but it's Sunday. Yeah, here you can see the loopholes. So they could shoot through them and it leads into the stag moat.
Sorry, I don't speak English. I speak English. Okay.
So the wall continues all the way, but it's a dead end, so we'll come down through here. So here, this yellow house, that's a Renaissance tavern. You know, in the 16th century, every 8 houses in Prague brewed beer. So that's roughly 12% of all the houses in Prague brewed beer, because back then the water wasn't clean, but if you brewed it, you made it into a beer, you could drink it. So let's have a look. Let's have a look inside. So that's the tavern. And this is the kitchen. You know, in the Czech language, there's a saying, like nechat sekeru, nebo like something, you know, when you don't have money to pay, you say that you leave an axe. And that's actually a historical thing people did, you know, when they didn't have money to pay, they would leave their axe like a collateral, and later they would come and pay the debt. So we still use that saying. Then over here we have a house of a goldsmith, also Renaissance, 16th century. So it's after the goldsmiths that the Golden Lane got its name. And notice the bird cages, because the goldsmiths, they worked with dangerous gases. So when there was a leakage, when there was a leak, they would know, because the birds would die. And then over here we have a house of Matilda Průšová, who lived here in the first half of the 20th century. She was a fortune teller, and a very famous one. Now, it is said that she lost her son in World War I, but she never wanted to accept it, so she always prepared a table for 2. And here, this is the room where she did the fortune telling. And Matilda Průšová, the fortune teller, she was killed by the Gestapo during World War II. Allegedly, after a Gestapo officer, after he went to her to ask about the result of World War II, and she told him that Germany would lose, and she was arrested and died during the interrogation. Yeah, she had clients from all over the world. Like, for example, people sent her letters from as far as South Africa. And here finally we have House of the Red Artilleryman. So these were the first people who built the houses here during the times of Rudolf II. So they were defending the castle. They were called the Red Artilleryman after their dresses, which were inspired by the Swiss Guard in Vatican, which was designed by Michelangelo. And then here we have a house of Josef Kazda, who was a film expert. He collected movies and he would do projections for his friends. So you can see a lot of movie posters and discs. So this is where he did his projections.
No to extra, jak robili filmy, super.
You know, the most famous actress before World War II in Czechoslovakia was Lida Barová. And unfortunately for her, she had an affair with Joseph Goebbels during World War II. So, you know, Joseph Goebbels, he was so much in love with her that he wanted to leave his family, his kids, and he wanted to leave the Nazi party as well. And he was a minister of propaganda, so he wanted to leave all that and just go live with her until Hitler intervened and said that he should break up with Lida and stick to his wife. So he did. Yeah, Lida was really the most talented actress, and most likely, if it wasn't for communism and it wasn't for her affair with Joseph Goebbels, she would have made it to Hollywood. But never happened. So now we're going to have a look at the Daliborka Tower, which is part of the original fortification from the 15th century, and until the end of 18th century, it served as a prison. So for more than 300 years, it served as a prison, and there were prisoners who committed crimes against the king who were imprisoned here. It's named after Dalibor of Kozojedy, who was a Czech nobleman who sheltered escaped peasants, and for that he received the death penalty. But awaiting for his execution, he was locked up here in the dungeon on the bottom of the tower. And allegedly he was bored, and he asked the guards to give him a violin, and he would play his violin, and he would be heard all over the castle until his death. So today there's an exhibition about torture tools. For example, this is a cage that was used for transportation of prisoners. Now, originally the prison was 7 floors. However, the last 4 floors burned down when the tower got hit by lightning. So we only have the dungeon on the bottom, then the guards room, and then this room. But it used to be a staircase, and there were wooden cells on the sides. You know, today there's a exhibition about torture tools. For example, we can see a headsman's sword over here, which is blunt at the end. You know, it wasn't used for stabbing, but only for chopping off heads. By the way, headsman's swords were only used for noblemen. Commoners, they received an axe. Yeah, this is a rack to stretch people. Now over here we have Iron Maiden, which is actually a fantasy tool from the 19th century. It wasn't used historically. And notice this one, it's called the Pillowinks. It was very popular torture tools. That was for fingers, you know, they would put your fingers inside and squeeze them. And that was used because it was portable and efficient, like torture to go, basically. And now we're gonna go down into the guards room and the dungeon, the starving room. So this room was used by the guards. They could cook over here, and they could defend the castle through there. They had guns. And down here they lowered people on a rope. And this is the bottom of the tower where they kept prisoners, the starving room. So this is the only way in and out. And then over here we have a morgue. So they put dead bodies in here. Yeah, and here we have a house of a Burgrave. It was basically like a manager of the castle, taking care of everyday business. And finally here, we have Lobkowicz Palace, this brown palace. So that's owned by the family Lobkowicz. It's the only privately owned object in the Prague castle. The Lobkowicz family emigrated to Massachusetts in 1950s to avoid communism, and their properties were confiscated. But in 1992 they got the properties back. So the current owner, William Lobkowicz, was born in Boston, and he got the properties back in 1992, and he lives in Prague nowadays. So the Lobkowicz Palace today, it's a museum. They also organize weddings, concerts inside. They have a restaurant there and a shop. So yeah, that's Lobkowicz family. You know, inside they have also collections, for example, original violin from Beethoven, because Lobkowicz family were the biggest sponsors of Beethoven throughout his career. And they invited him to Prague in 1796. So guys, this is the end of our part 4 of the Prague Castle series. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to book a tour in person, either with me or one of my colleagues, you can go to our website, lucidtours.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can click a like button, and we'll see you on our next episode. So thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.